So yes, I know it's another iPad Pro video, but honestly, as we get closer to that potential release date, the leaks have increased, and today we have a pretty important leak because it gives us our clearest idea of what exactly this refresh encompasses. So of course, I made a very detailed video on an iPad Pro Max yesterday, which you can check out in the icon above, but essentially, we've been having all kind of wacky leaks from OLED iPads happening in 2022 to the 11-inch size potentially being discontinued. There's just been all kinds of information out there, and it's really been hard for me to kind of wrap my head around what exactly Apple's going to do with the iPad Pro refresh. But finally, we have a leak from Makatakara, which pretty much delves into what exactly this refresh is going to be and what exactly we can expect, right from the minute details such as some changes in the speaker holes to possibly changes in the camera design. Apple's apparently making mini LED exclusive to the bigger size. All these really fine details about this upcoming refresh that leads me to believe that this source is pretty accurate. And so without further ado, let's just delve into this. Make sure to like and subscribe, click that notification for the latest Apple news and rumors, and with that being said, let's just tuck in. Let's delve into the first key piece of info from this report, and that is the fact that they confirm the 12.9-inch model will be the only model gaining mini LED. So this is the first report in a while that actually mentions the existence of the 11-inch iPad Pro. So I initially predicted that maybe Apple's planning to kill it and replace it with the iPad Air, but clearly that's not the case. Clearly there will be a 2021 refresh, but there is a catch, and that is the fact it is going to be sticking with LCD for the time being. Obviously, we have some leaks claiming that the 11-inch size will get OLED in 2022, so maybe for the time being, Apple's thinking that, hey, mini LED can just be in the bigger model, and the smaller model can just keep LCD. Now, of course, a question that comes to everyone's mind is why? Why would Apple do this? Well, there are a few theories I have myself. So my first point comes from a logistical standpoint. So of course, right now, I'm assuming Apple shares the same 11-inch LCD panels across the iPad Air and the 11-inch iPad Pro. And of course, Timothy being the supply chain guy he is, it makes sense to do this because of course Apple can save costs by sharing the same display across these two ranges, but also it's way more efficient, and so Apple can produce more of these iPads. But of course, if Apple were to introduce mini LED to the whole iPad Pro lineup, then of course Apple would have to make an LCD panel for the iPad Air and then a mini LED panel for the 11-inch Pro, and so that would just distort things and that would not be as efficient. And so yes, I can see from that viewpoint as to why Apple won't include mini LED on the smaller Pro. Another logistical reason that was pointed out by Digitimes was the fact that Apple suppliers have been finding it difficult to make these mini LED panels, and so maybe due to supply constraints, Apple's decided that hey, only the bigger model needs mini LED, we can just suffice with the LCD panels on the 11-inch model. But also it could just come down to the fact that Apple wants people to buy the biggest model in the lineup. For example, we saw this with the iPhone 12 Pro Max that has considerably better cameras than the rest of the lineup. And so in this instance, the iPad Pro 12.9-inch has the better display than the rest of the lineup. But also take into account that if Apple is actually thinking of keeping LCD on the 11-inch model, then possibly mini LED isn't actually that big of an upgrade as we initially thought. Because of course, if this was going to be something drastic, I am very certain Apple would have included it across the lineup. If it's something that the average user will actually benefit and notice, then definitely Apple would have included it across the lineup and obviously would have included it everywhere in the marketing. But now I'm thinking that mini LED might not actually be such a huge change, and maybe if you want the huge display upgrade, you'll have to wait till next year for the OLED refresh happening with the iPad Pros. Either way, I am looking forward to what mini LED exactly offers. Of course, we'll have to see what the reviews say. And remember, of course, that even if the 11-inch model misses out on mini LED, it gets an A14 chip, it gets 5G, possibly better cameras, so there are a host of improvements here, and the lack of a mini LED panel isn't such a huge negative. Anyways, let's now delve into the second piece of info from this report, and basically, the bigger 12.9-inch model should be around 0.5 millimeters thicker than the current model because, of course, it needs to incorporate the mini LED panel. Now, of course, 0.5 millimeters doesn't sound like a lot, but personally, I think that is actually kind of considerably thicker than the current model. Though I do want to mention the iPhone 12 Pro is 0.7 millimeters thinner than the iPhone 11 Pro, and as someone who has the iPhone 12, which by the way has the same thickness as the 12 Pro, it is considerably thinner than the previous generation iPhones, and you can certainly feel it. And so I feel like that is something that some people might notice, and some people might consider being a con. But of course, there is always an upside to everything, and I guess in this case, the upside to the extra thickness could possibly mean less bending, because we know the iPad Pros, the 2018 and 2020 models, have been susceptible to a lot of bending. We've seen all the videos from Jerry Rig Everything, so yes, this hopefully could prevent that. I think the only issue is the iPad Air is also thicker than the iPad Pros, and it didn't really fare that well as well in terms of the bend test, so I'm not really sure if the design being thicker will help. I think the structure needs to be reinforced and needs to be redesigned to be more stronger. So yeah, I'm not too sure. I guess we'll have to wait and see. We'll obviously have like tech racks and Jerry Rig Everything, bending iPads everywhere. So yes, let's wait for that, and hopefully we can hope for the best. Also, this additional thickness kind of begs the question, hey, can one use existing accessories with this new iPad Pro? For example, imagine buying a $350 keyboard for your iPad last year, and then Apple expects you to buy another one for this new model because they made it slightly thicker. Obviously, that would be kind of dumb, and even for Apple, slightly scummy. So I think that will not be the case, and since the Air is actually slightly thicker than the iPad Pros, I have a feeling that the extra thickness will not affect the compatibility of existing cases and accessories, so you should be fine if you're upgrading from the 2018 or 2020 model. However, one thing I'm not looking forward to because of this extra thickness is the heft. The heft of this iPad Pro is going to be unwieldy, I think, because I feel like the 12.9-inch model as it is right now is already borderline kind of heavy, and so you can imagine with this new display and the slightly thicker body, the weight's going to go up, and pair that with a Magic Keyboard, and this is going to be a pretty heavy boy. Right, another really key thing to note about this iPad Pro refresh is the cameras. So I've mentioned in the past that possibly we could see some camera upgrades. Maybe these new iPads could incorporate the iPhone 12 cameras. Maybe we could see a triple lens system, as it's been rumored in the past. But we now have some information about the camera layout and the design, which sounds pretty interesting. So the first thing is pretty obvious, I can't lie. They mentioned the camera lenses are going to protrude less, and that makes complete sense because of course a thicker body means the cameras can be more inside, if you get what I'm saying. So if you have a modern iPhone, you might notice the camera lenses actually stick out of the body ever so slightly, and that is the same case with the 2020 models of the iPad Pro, and that should be eliminated with this new version of the iPad Pro, which I guess is good news. I mean, I'll take a flush camera body because that's something that always bugs me with smartphones. The fact the camera just sticks out like a sore thumb, that is very nice. But in terms of changes I wanted with this iPad Pro, this wasn't something I was asking for. But anyways, another thing they mention is a longer stretched lens cover. Now, I'm not too sure what that means. That could possibly mean that we're seeing a larger sensor because the lens is slightly wider. And so my thinking is that maybe Apple's going to give the iPhone 12 Pro Max's cameras to the iPad Pro. So essentially, the sensor that's 48% bigger, that's 88% better in low light, those are ridiculous figures in an iPad. I'm not sure if people will actually utilize that amazing camera, and I feel like it's a bit overkill, but I guess Apple is going to be Apple, and they want to push the limits with iPad photography, so there's that. We can expect some pretty substantial upgrades with the cameras of this 2021 iPad Pro. But there is an interesting thing to note, and that is, are these camera upgrades coming to both models, or is it going to be exclusive to the bigger mini LED refresh? I'm not too sure. I think personally, both models should get the same camera experience, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. We finally come at the last tidbit, and this is by far the most interesting and somewhat weird leak out of this report. So this leak mentions the speaker holes of the next iPad Pro will be reduced by 2/3, and it will also be moving in position. So of course right now the iPad Pros have speakers on the sides, it's quad firing, and of course there are a number of holes for these speakers, but apparently because of some reason Apple's reducing the number of holes on the iPad. Now honestly, I'm not too sure why Apple would do this. Maybe the fact the display is thicker means they had to compromise on the speaker. That could be a reasoning. I don't know, but yeah, apparently, like I mentioned, they will change position and apparently they will be adjusted for better performance. Now, of course, I am no specialist when it comes to audio, but surely having less holes means it's going to be a quieter speaker, right? I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure what Apple's doing with the speakers. Hopefully, they just maintain the audio as it is right now. I would be very fine with that because the iPad Pros have excellent speakers, and so please, Apple, do not mess with those beautiful speakers. Of course, another really interesting thing to note about all of this information is how will price be affected, because of course I have mentioned in the past that maybe along with 5G and of course a slightly more expensive display, could we see a price hike with the bigger iPad Pro? And honestly, the more I think about it, the more likely it seems, and I feel like Apple's going to move the iPad Pro 12.9-inch model to $1,100 instead of the $1,000 it's currently at. It would be nice to maybe include more base storage, maybe 256 as standard for that price, but knowing Apple, they're not going to do that. They're not going to be nice to us. They're going to give us 128 as standard as usual. So yes, we've just got to accept the price hike and just be fine with it. And so yes, this is pretty much everything the report delves into. And like I mentioned yesterday, I'm kind of getting a feel of an iPad Pro Max here. Obviously, the 12.9-inch model has the upper hand in the display tech, and so maybe Apple will have other features to differentiate it from the 11-inch model. But tell me in the comments below, are you fine with Apple differentiating the 11-inch and 12.9-inch model? Are you fine with the 11-inch model sticking with LCD? And are you fine if the 12.9-inch model has a slightly better camera system? Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click that notification for the latest Apple news and rumors. Check out a video here about my pretty outdated theory on the iPad Pro Max. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya, peeps.